Great. So I'm Martha Piscuskas. I work with the Maine Arts Commission. We have tonight with us Kerstin Gilg and David Greenham from the commission. And before we begin, I'll just say that I want to acknowledge that we are on unceded territories of the Wabanaki people, the homeland of people of the Dawn, and that those folks who have been here for thousands and thousands of years, the Penobscot, the Passamaquoddy, the Abenaki, the Micmac, and the Maliseet, and have stewarded this beautiful land that we are on. And I'm appreciative that there's a lot of environmental organizations that work to continue that. And some of them work closely with the Wabanaki people. So I'm grateful that that work continues. So we are here to talk about grants for arts education. The Maine Arts Commission is really excited to continue to fund arts education projects, and our grant offerings are a little different this year. So we wanted to make sure that everybody got the lowdown. So we're gonna talk about that, staff's gonna talk about that, and then we have a panel of experienced grant writers who are arts educators who will be also sharing their experience. And you can ask lots of questions. So we have, I will just introduce our folks right now. We have Kate Smith, who is a music teacher for K through grades K through 3 at the Central School in South Berwick. She is a former York County Teacher of the Year. She is a teacher leader in Maple, which is the Maine Arts Education Partners in Leadership. She was the leader of that, co-chair of that for the last 2 years. And she also gives private piano lessons. So if you're in York County.
Pull laundry out of the dryer? Never.
Did you ask me to?
No.
Maybe you could mute. Yeah, make sure everybody's muted. Thank you. We have Reba Askari, who is a longtime actor and theater in Maine. She is the theater artistic director for Maddie's Theater at the Children's Museum and Theater of Maine, which is the brandiest new theater in the state of the art. Everyone's, I'm sure, wants to perform there. And Reba led the design and charge on that one. So we're really glad to have, and Reba's a teaching artist as well. And Kim Bernard, another teaching artist who is an independent freelance teaching artist who connects to many, many partners. She creates sculpture that you will hear about that is really fun, recycled, kinetic, interactive, public, and involves the community. She's taught and shown throughout Maine and all over the country. And she'll be talking about her pop-up cycler later. So let's just jump in. Kerstin, do you want to run that PowerPoint?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for sharing your time with us. At the start of the meeting, I'm going to be presenting a slideshow that kind of highlights what our thinking is for our fiscal cycle 23, which is FY23. You don't need to know it's because we started in July. But anyway, we've done a lot of changes to the grants this year. If you're looking at our services and you're a regular user of our website and have gotten grants from us before, you'll probably notice that the arts learning grants are no longer being offered as a distinct grant entity. And so we wanted to make sure that despite not having that specific arts education, arts learning grant, that arts educators are still very welcome to apply. We want to encourage you to apply for this fiscal cycle. And we wanted to kind of explain sort of the restructuring that we're doing so you know how to create a grant for us and be competitive. So those of you who may not know about the Maine Arts Commission. We're part of the Maine state government, and we're also part of the Maine Cultural Council, which is 7 cultural organizations that all work together, including like the library, the archives, Historical Society, Humanities Council, things like that. Our kind of special superpower is that we do a lot of granting. Other organizations support their organizations like libraries and other ways. We do a lot of grants to the sector, and we usually do them in 2 ways, through organization grants and individual artist grants. And as arts educators working within schools, you're in a really good position to have access to a lot of these funds, being both creative people yourselves and also having the support. Hopefully you have the support of your school district with you in order to go after some other funds. As you can see, the shaded, the faded grid is what we were offering last year. And as you can see, there's a lot fewer things this year, just because we had kind of had a bit of scope creep in what we were doing, and we really wanted to kind of get back to basics, and also to kind of help our offerings become more understandable to the sector. So really, this is what we're offering now, and these grants are currently all open and have a deadlines in April, except for the organization operations grant, which just closed. But we offer an artist springboard grant if you haven't been funded as an individual artist from us before. And it's a lower barrier grant with a smaller dollar to really help emerging artists and artists who aren't familiar with grant making to kind of get their toe in the water. The artist project grant has a slightly higher award amount, and that's for artists that kind of regularly use grant writing as part of their toolbox for funding. And they're kind of similar. Those are kind of related grants. The organization project grant is for projects that are undertaken by an organization, and schools are encouraged to apply. So even though you as an individual teacher can't apply for this, you can have your school district apply for funding that would support your work in the classroom. And that's whether you're an artist, a teacher, or a teaching artist that wants to go into schools, or a teacher in the schools that's not teaching an art class but wants to involve the arts in some aspects of your science class or something else. So it's very broad. And then we have the others that are just there to know about, I guess, as individual creatives. We offer fellowships that are a merit award. So if you're a practicing artist, that might be something you might want to look into. And also we offer apprenticeships. So if you're interested in learning some kind of heritage-based art or craft and learning from a master, that would be something as you might want to look into as far as professional development. That's kind of the whole smorgasbord that we've got going on this cycle. And so to kind of go back, the Artist Springboard Grant and the Artist Project Grant, we like to use the term artist, but really it's any kind of creative individual. But you should be aware that you'll be applying in relation to other artists to the Arts Commission. So there really needs to be kind of an artistic excellence and artistic merit focus on whatever project you're proposing. But really this could include projects either that you're doing out in public or getting money yourself to support your work within the classroom, such as creative projects with your students, field work, field trips kind of things, as well as hopefully maybe even supporting your own creative practice outside of school. So these are all meant for individuals, which means that when you get the award, you would be kind of paying the taxes on that award, which is really kind of the only the downside of that. But otherwise, it is support for your work and the work that you're doing either in the classroom in a creative way or outside with your own practice. The organization project grant also is useful, but you'd need to be working with your school district for this. So individuals can't apply, schools can't apply. The school district would be applying, and that would be the entity that we would primarily be sending the funding to were you to be awarded. So, but again, it's for if you want to have an organization come into your school and work with your class, that's great. If you want to work with an individual artist, that's also great to hire that in. There's a lot of different ways, and this is essentially what has really absorbed the Arts Learning Grant that we had offered last cycle. We basically just decided to treat schools like other cultural arts entities and kind of say, this is really the grant for your organizational support as a school, as looking to do projects that are creative and engaging and involving the K through 12 populations. And also we have one last kind of specialty award, which is the Ticket to Ride program. And that is not currently available, but will come online July 1st with our whole fiscal cycle starting over for FY23. And that's to defray costs of busing students from schools to arts events to venues. So it helps offset, we found that there's a weak link in the chain of schools and students that want to go attend venues, and the venues wanting to get the students there and do this kind of outreach and engagement with their community, but a lot of times the transportation wasn't able to get funded. So this is just for transportation funding. And again, it's through school departments to offset. It says it's a $500 award. That's a typo. It's actually a $400 maximum award. But if your busing costs less than $400 for the first trip, you can apply again for a different trip to get the remainder. So it's a maximum of $400 based on like the total. You get like 1 year allotment if you want it, as it were. This is kind of the general breakdown of how our timeline goes with the grants. Right now, you can kind of see we're around the March 15th, where we're sending out notices to organization operations applicants because we just did that review. And coming up on April 7th and April 14th are the deadlines for the awards that I just discussed. So you've got a little bit of time to think about projects. If you have ideas that you want to discuss with anyone at the Arts Commission, please give us a call. We're really happy to kind of brainstorm with you about what would be the most competitive way of presenting a project to the review panel, because we really do want to see you successful in what your endeavors are. And if you want to do some exploring on our website beforehand, before you call us, we have a lot of really good resources. There's an arts, if you go to our website, kind of in the middle of the header is funding, and that's where it all lives. There's a great help section within that funding page, and there's a lot of documents there that talk about setting up an account if you haven't done that yet, or how to navigate the grant application portal, or what kind of budget you might want to think about doing in an example budget form before you get into the application. There's a lot of really good stuff there. But we've also added a new page called the definitions page, because we understand that sometimes the language we're using isn't always as accessible as the written language folks use in their regular daily lives. So when we talk about things like matching funds, or we want to see a grant be a benefit to the community, there's a little bit more explanation around that. So you have a better idea of sort of what we mean when we say Maine resident. And you're like, well, I don't know, am I a Maine resident? I'm here for the summer months, but I leave in the winter. Does that count? And we can say like, well, here's the legal definition. You tell us if you count. So this kind of clarifying things like that. But if you have questions beyond that, please, give us a call, both with these kind of technical questions if they're confusing, or with creative questions when you are thinking about your projects. Like I said, we really like talking to you and trying to help build the most competitive application that you can make. So that's kind of the short overview of sort of where we have come from and where we are right now. I'm not sure if we want to save our questions till the end, or if there's anything that's really pressing right now. What would you prefer, Martha?
That's a good question. I was just wondering about that. Maybe if people want to put their questions in the chat, and we will get to them. There's a few more things that I'd like to add about where we're at, and then I would like to jump to our other people. So definitely put questions in the chat. And as Kerstin said, there's a much improved, robust help page where I bet many answers to your questions can be found. I'd like to just talk a little bit about some of the things that are different from the Arts Learning Grant. And I'm going to share, make sure I'm on the right page, about our criteria So we've simplified things, we hope. And for an organization project grant, you know, how is this going to be evaluated? And so we have 20% for the organization project grant, artistic excellence and artistic merit, which I'll go back to in a second. 35% on evidence that the funds will be used strategically to achieve the project's goals. So that's, does your budget make sense? We have a whole nother workshop that's also recorded about budgets, and there's also information on our help page. But it's really about how does it look like your project is realistic? Are there questions? You know, is it all pretty straightforward? And then 35% on organizational community benefit. And as Kerstin said, there's also some descriptions of that. And for arts education, it's really, I feel like it's kind of a slam dunk for y'all, because it's pretty clear what the benefit's going to be. You say what you're going to do, and this is what your audience, your young people, or your students or adults, whoever, are going to be, you know, learning this, taking on this skill. So that's going to be pretty clear for you, I think. And then 10% for overall quality. So those are the criteria for the organization, and the individual artist is just slightly different. It's 40% for artistic excellence and artistic merit. So the teaching artist needs to show that they know what they're doing. 35% to show that your funds are going to be used the way in a reasonable way. 15% community engagement. And that's because this is geared towards the artist, not necessarily teaching artists, but you also have that one in the bag. And then 10% for overall quality. So I'm just going to scooch up here for artistic excellence. These are some descriptions from the National Endowment for the Arts that I think might be helpful. Basically, when we're talking about merit and excellence, it really has to do within the context of your project. It's kind of merit. So the importance and appropriateness of the project to the community in which the project takes place. It's, we had a question earlier, like if a community music group wants to apply, will they have as much of a chance as a professional group on Portland stage, like Merrill Auditorium? Yes, the answer is yes, because of how you position the project in your narrative, and who is the audience, and what impact is it going to have to your community. So we're happy to talk more about that, but and the panelists that we invite are all very aware of the broad spectrum of cultural activities in Maine, and that there's a wide variety of creativity. So I wanted to show that. I also wanted to just quickly show our teaching artist roster, which is going to be changing. So this is what it looks like right now. And this is a place for you if you're ever wondering about where to find teaching artists. Kim Bernard is here, Reba Askari is here. Allison and Hunt Smith, for instance, are folks that Kate worked with. And I just wanted to show you, this is kind of the grand total of what we've been able to show of what the offerings are. We are now going to be working with Creative Ground, and an artist is going to have a much bigger profile. So this is Nemery Keita. He's also on our roster, a West African drummer, and Culture Barrier. And so this is where it starts, and then you can scroll down, and there's a lot more data that you can find out about our teaching artists, and any any artist or cultural organization for that matter. So I just wanted to show you that that's what it's going to be what it's going to look like soon. Okay, I think I'm going to stop sharing. So if you have any questions, remember to put them in the chat. And let's jump right into our wonderful guests. So we're going to start off with Kate, who's going to talk about a project that was to our dance learning grant, which we no longer have, but it would still, all the components that she's going to talk about would still fit into our current offerings. Go ahead, Kate.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to add to that list of things that I've done. I've been a teacher since 1998. That also happens to be the first year I wrote a grant. And I don't think that's a coincidence. So it's good to see all of you. I know that grant writing allows us to be more invested in what we're doing and expand what we're doing. And that's so important for our communities and our students. So as Martha said, I was able to work with Allison and Hunt Smith back in 2019. I found them in part because of the roster. I'm very excited to see the updates. I think that's fantastic. It's invaluable to be able to find those special people to come into your classroom. So we brought in Allison and Hunt to work with us on traditional folk and line dances in 2019 in anticipation of Maine's 200th birthday. We wanted to really help them understand what was it like to celebrate back then. What would they have done? How would they have gathered to do all their social interactions? And we wanted it to be as realistic as possible. So, and rather than have recordings that we could have danced to, bring in those live musicians. And anyone who's taught at the elementary level knows it's so great to have extra hands in there. So to have those teaching artists in there helping us while I and my co-teacher, Kerstin, our PE teacher, could go around and really help the students and be active with the students and play with the students. So that was really important to us. We also were able to introduce new vocabulary to them. We obviously taught them a new way to be active, and we culminated our residency with a family dance. So we were able to bring in those families and teach them about what it would have been like to celebrate 200 years ago. And families had a blast. We had well over 100 people. And I teach pre-K through 3rd grade, and many of them brought little brothers and sisters. So we had, toddlers right on up to grandparents dancing away, and it was an absolute blast. It was really fortuitous to be able to work with Kerstin, our PE teacher, because that enabled us to see students twice a week. So it still fit in our existing schedule. And Kerstin was a buy-in, right? She wanted to see the kids be active and was interested in learning more about dances. So one of the pieces we really wanted was an element of sustainability. So having that other person in the room with me helped us to go, gee, I think I could do this again. Do you think we could do this again? Yeah, I think we could. Or quick videotape this one. I don't know if we'll ever remember it. So having that other adult in the space was really helpful. So I want to talk a little bit more about sustainability. When I am writing grants, I want to know that this is an investment for me and my students. And I say that in that I want to know, what am I going to learn? I also have to be able to talk to my administrator and say, yeah, I know I'm your music teacher, but here's why we need to bring additional people in to support my program. And so if I can say that I'm learning along with the students and that I'm going to be able to sustain a traditional dance program long after they're gone, that investment becomes exponential, right? So having that ability to emphasize the sustainability is critical. And in fact, I've had dozens of teaching artists come in through my classroom over the years, and each time I make sure that I'm also adding to my skill set. I just think that's so critical. So let's see, we had Allison and Hunt with us for 3 days in October. We danced, we had a blast. But then came March of 2020. We did the dances. We remembered how they went, and we reviewed them with all of our students. And I'm really proud to say, this is sad but true, March 8th was the last day that we were in person at our school. We all know why. And the very last hour of the last day that we were all together, we were doing dances to celebrate Maine's 200th birthday. And if I retire tomorrow, or if I retire in 30 years, that will be my highlight. It carried me through those next few really difficult months to know that those kids were with each other, were laughing, were so happy. And we have videos to prove it. So it was an absolute success. So when I write a grant, and Martha, stop me if you need to, I know we're tight on time. When I write a grant, I first write it in my mind, and I'm sure we all do this differently, but I process it. I talk to other people. And if I can't succinctly explain what I want in my grant, I'm not ready to write the grant. It needs to keep bubbling up. And sometimes I find as I bubble it, I don't actually need funding. I need maybe that parent who has the skill set that I'm looking for to just come in and maybe meet with me a little bit. And that could be any number of scenarios. But if I can't be succinct in describing to others what it is that I'm thinking, I'm just not ready. Think of it kind of like TED Talks, right? If you can't tell everybody what you're thinking in 18 minutes, then you're just not ready. Also consider stakeholders. It's always easier when you have somebody else who's just as passionate about something as you are. So brainstorming who also would benefit from this is really important. Another thing I like to stop and think about is, are there any community needs that we have? And how could the arts fit this need, or take care of this need, or address this need, or bring attention to this need? And who else is concerned about this need? Because they're probably going to want to support it as well, whether that's financially or bringing in their own ideas. So multidisciplinary can be a way to address a community need. Talk to the other teachers in your building, in your community, to see if they too think this is a good idea, and be open to it shifting a little as they give their perspective. That's going to help you go back to being succinct about your idea. When you're thinking about who else may be a stakeholder, you've got parents, you've got teaching artists in the community who may already be thinking about this. You've got businesses and organizations that all may want to chime in. So be bold and really think outside the box. When I'm vetting a teaching artist, I no longer take the first warm body. When I was an early teacher, I was grateful for any help I could get. Now I'm a little bit more careful. So I go to the roster, I read it, I narrow it down to teaching artists who might be within the framework of what I'm thinking for my idea, but I also talk around. Now, Martha mentioned the Maine Arts Educators, Partners in Leadership. They're comprised of teaching artists and educators from across the state, and I can say some of the best in the state. They're there because they are passionate about what they do. So if you see that a teaching artist is also part of this Maple organization, win-win. Those are the cream of the crop, in my opinion. I've never gone wrong with any of those teaching artists. I also look for people who know the language in my building. For instance, I had a teaching artist come in and do an anti-bullying program through music. And the very first thing I did before we ever signed anything, I sat him down and said, tell me what you know about responsive classroom. And he knew. And I said, the reason is because your language has got to match ours. Anti-bullying is too sensitive. So it's okay to advocate for what you're looking for, your program. You don't have to settle by any means. When you're looking at teaching artists, of course, go see if they're recommended, where else they've been, but also look at, do they have evidence that they know how to address the needs of all your students? Do they provide access to learning for all students? These are really key to educators, right? We want our needs mapped for all of our students. I also look to see, are they aware of assessment? How do they know that they're good? How do they know that the kids learned anything? So looking at that assessment piece can be really critical. I have to prove to my administration, and very often to the people who fund my projects, no, really, we learned, we gained. This is how we know that we learned something. And last, I want to talk about budget. Keep your budget simple if you can, but also really break it down, think as thoroughly as you can so that you don't miss anything. Do you need meals? Do you need travel? Is your teaching artist that you're thinking about 3 hours away? Because Maine is a big state. That's going to add to the cost of your residency. So lots to keep in mind. Happy to help anyone on this call with any ideas, brainstorming, thought partner, whatever you would like. Thanks, Martha.
Thank you, Kate. One of the things that I really appreciate about how you do this, what you said to me was that for about a dozen years, you bring in a different teaching artist and learn from them, and then you can carry on that learning continuously. So building up your own professional development skill bank and having a new face every year with the students.
That's right.
That's such a great practice.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And questions, continue to put them in there. So Reba is a teaching artist and works for a community arts organization, has also written successful Maine Arts Commission grants and others. So why don't you share your thoughts?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Reba Askari, and I work at the Children's Museum and Theater of Maine. And I've been here for about 13 years. And we have written... Sorry, I'm on radio and I'm turning it off. So we have written grants for the Maine Arts Commission for many years, and sometimes we are successful and sometimes we are not successful. So I'm experienced at writing unsuccessful grants as well as I'm experienced at writing successful grants. So we've written organization grants before, and last year we wrote an arts learning grant, which was granted. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our arts learning grant and talk about kind of how I could see it fitting into an organization grant in the future potentially, and kind of what that process looked like. So the arts learning grant that we wrote last year was for our ensemble theater program, which is something new that we've adopted with our move to our brand new location. And it's really, the idea is to work with young people and create theater with them, holding up the idea of ensemble and teamwork, and starting with improv games, starting with team building, and then coming together and saying, what story do you want to tell? And then rehearsing a play based on their personal choices. So the grant that we wrote was to partner with the Boys and Girls Club of Southern Maine and to bring our ensemble program to the Riverton Club. And so we're kind of halfway through, or I mean, I guess it's March now, so 3/4 of the way through this process, partnering with the Boys and Girls Club. And we really framed this grant as a pilot partnership with the hope of expanding to other Boys and Girls Clubs and bringing our ensemble outside of our organization here on Thompson's Point and into other places in the community that don't have theater programs and that need theater programs. So the idea really kind of came from a really mission-oriented part of our organization that we wanted to do anyway, right? Like, we really knew that we wanted to have these ensembles. We knew we wanted to partner with the Boys and Girls Club to increase our accessibility and to give access to these programs to kids that may otherwise not have them. So that's where the idea came from. at the museum and theater, we do a lot of team thinking. So I feel really lucky that I had a whole team of people, you know, that I gave my elevator pitch to and got pushback and questions, and I was able to write paragraphs and then jump into a Google Doc and have people comment and say, what do you mean by this? So that's kind of our grant writing process. And again, I feel really blessed and lucky, and it's a good lesson where when I'm not here and I'm writing grants as an independent artist or with my theater company, Mad Horse Theater, it's an idea I try to replicate, because I just think that more minds working together is more successful. So we did a lot of group thinking. We had a lot of early meetings with the Boys and Girls Club to talk about like what that relationship would look like and what that partnership would look like. So I think that's another thing about like having those planning conversations and working out those details, even though you're actually doing the project a long way off and you always have to course correct and kind of figure things out as you go, like trying to just like bring artists and entities and organizations together as much as possible, as soon as possible in those early stages. And so we wrote this grant, and I think what was kind of thrilling for us at the Children's Museum and Theater of Maine, and Kate Smith, you might laugh about this a little bit, but knowing that with the Arts Learning Grant, we had to fit into the standards, and we had to like embrace the DOE art standards and really prove that we were going to meet these art and theater standards. So since we're educators, but we're not teachers, this was like a big feat for my team. Like we dove deep, and it was really a challenge for us and fun for us. But it's also a relief to know that we wouldn't necessarily have to do that in the future as we apply for grants with the Maine Arts Commission, because it took us a long time. But we also wrote the curriculum for our ensemble piece, which we used not just in this partnership for the Boys and Girls Club, but it's also the curriculum that we're using with all of our on-site ensembles as well. So that was really great to like have this polished curriculum that we had to submit in the grant format. So thinking about what I might do differently, say if I were applying as fitting this project into an organizational grant, I wouldn't necessarily have to dive into those theater standards that are on the DOE website and for the state of Maine. But I think what I would do, kind of looking back at it and seeing where we're at now and seeing how like much this ensemble has become like truly an SEL, like social emotional experience for these kids. Like I would put some time and work into writing like talking about SEL standards and talking about like the SEL components of theater for young people, and like find like list some SEL standards and talk about how we're hitting those marks. And I would also, I mean, I would definitely also submit the curriculum as part of that backup material. I mean, I think that it's something that as a teaching artist, and a big realization to make is that difference between like process versus product, right? And when the criteria is talking about like high quality art that doesn't just reference the product that you're making. It really is also referencing the process that you're undertaking, like the trip to get there, the road that you're taking, and like ensuring, I think I would spend a lot of time really showing and proving that my process is high quality, and trying to hammer that home. I think so. Yeah, and just thinking about the way that we've applied for organization grants and the way that we applied for the arts learning grant. When we applied for the organization grant several years ago and got it, I mean, we were showing production photos, we were showing reviews. We were really talking about that final product and how polished it was going to be and trying to prove that. Whereas I think that like in the organization grant, from what I understand now, like it's the process is as equal weighted, if not more than what that final show is going to look like. Budget wise, I really tried to look realistically about my team's time and how much time we were going to be putting into planning, and then also how much time we were going to put into doing. I tried to be realistic about materials, and it was also like looking at what our organization could provide as a cash match. I think that's all I've got. But does anyone have any questions, or are we doing questions at the end?
If there's a question, actually, I think people, if there's questions, throw them in the chat, because I do want to make sure we have room. But I will just say thank you and for bringing up that question about process versus product. And that is one thing that arts educators really know is the process, the importance of the process, and use whatever language you can find to articulate that really well in the narrative. I think that that absolutely would resonate with our review panels. It's not, it's not only about what happens at the end. It's very much about what happens on the way. Great, thank you. So Kim, let's hear from you.
So the angle that I'll take with our presentation is that of an independent artist, which I am. I am a teaching artist, and I work independently on projects that don't involve students. But for the sake of tonight's talk, as a teaching artist, I'd like to take you from the beginning of one particular project and the funding and process that has occurred to make that idea become a reality and bring it to students. So if you keep in mind that the things that are important to me to continue to work on with engaging an audience is that my work is public and that I am using recycled materials as close to 100% of the time as possible, that the work is interactive and it is able to be touched, handled, and that it's very accessible to an audience, that I'm involving the community. So even to say that I'm an independent artist is kind of a misnomer, because I partner always with other organizations in the community and in the Maine community, a larger community. My work is occasionally kinetic. So that means that it moves in one way or another. The things that I also involve in my work
It's a sleepover. And what?
is sustainability. And I will use that in a different way than Reba. When I'm talking about sustainability, I'm talking about the climate crisis and environmental issues. So those things get woven into all of my projects. So one project that I have been working on for years now, which actually I obsessed on the idea of for a couple of years prior to even doing anything about it. So let's just go back to 2017 for a moment. And I was obsessing on building machines that would recycle plastic. I had found an online open source called Precious Plastic with all the instructions and CAD files to build your own recycling machines. One being a plastic shredder, a plastic extruder, an injector, which presses hot plastic into a mold to make three-dimensional objects. And the last was a compression oven. So I thought for a long time about how much I wanted to do this, but I also was thinking about what a huge project and undertaking this would be. And finally, I just decided it's now or never. I just have to do this because I'm obsessed with it. So I started diving deeper into the open source material and convinced myself that I could build these 4 machines with the budget that they said these things could be built with. And I wrote a grant in 2019 through the Maine Arts Commission, and I did not receive the grant. And I feel like that's really important to share with you all because I continued regardless. And one of the things that helped a lot was listening in on the reviewers who you can hear your grant being reviewed and a number of other applicants as well. But listening to the way that the reviewers were trying to understand my application, my project, what they were confused about, not being able to contribute and provide clarity, but listening to how they weren't getting it. I didn't write it in a clear enough way that this could be understood. So I took that information to heart and I kept writing and I continued to look for a number of different sources for funding. So I did a year later write another Maine Arts Commission project grant and I received funding for the project to get off the ground. This was in 2020. I also did a big Kickstarter campaign. Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform. It's an all or nothing. So you determine how much funding you need. I needed $5,000, I decided. And if you don't meet your $5,000 goal, you don't get anything. So I campaigned hard to meet my goal, and I actually exceeded it and raised $7,500. I also in 2020 wrote and received a Kindling Fund grant, so that added another $5,000 to the campaign. So this was all not only to build the machines that I have. So what I also discovered, because as I was about to start building the machines, March of 2019, pandemic time, I realized that I didn't have the resources as far as people goes and help and contractors and machinists and machine shops, and I couldn't access the tools, equipment, and people that I needed to. And I realized I couldn't have built these myself without having a full-fledged machine shop and a scrap metal yard in the back. And certainly no way could I do it with the budget that Precious Plastic said I could. I really needed about 4 or 5 times the amount of money that they said I would need for this. So I needed all those funds to be able to purchase these machines, which I actually did. So I had my 4 recycling machines on the next step, because I wanted to take this out into the community, was to build a mobile unit to transport my machines to schools, libraries, community centers, art museums, wherever I was invited. So that was another big chunk of funding that I was seeking and did find resources for in what I described to you, the Maine Arts Commission, Kindling, Kickstarter. I've spent all of last summer building a 4x6 trailer that I call the pop-up cycler. And in it, I transport my recycling machines. You can see it on my website. And it's in the shape of a triangle, which is the recycling symbol. When I pull up to a location and fold down my workshop benches and have my machines inside, I'm actually able to work outside with participants and use that also as a pop-up. The last piece of the funding and project was to build a pedal shredder. So I wrote another Maine Arts Commission grant that I received for a pedal shredder, which would be, if you could imagine being a bicycle, stationary bicycle that you get on and you pedal and it shreds the plastic. So just to give you an idea of what all of this looks like, this is the plastic piece. It's just a cut piece from a milk jug or a water jug. So that's number 2 plastic that goes through the shredder and turns into a plastic snow. And then it comes out of my extruder in gooey, colorful plastic that is very flexible and can be manipulated. You can shape it, write with it, connect it to itself. So we sculpt with it as it comes out of the machine. Like I said, there's images on my website. You can have a look at that to get a visual of what all of this looks like. So I really wanted there to be a physical engagement with this project, which there is, because they're washing the plastic and they're shredding the plastic and they're extruding the plastic. So it's a lot of hands-on. But the pedal shredder was really important because as I'm working with students on this project, I'm also talking about, where does plastic come from? What is single-use plastic? How many times a day do you pick up something and you're holding plastic in your hand, from your toothbrush to your cell phone to a jug of milk? So there's a lot of instruction that's filtered in through this also. The pedal shredder allows them to be off the grid and shred the plastic with your feet. Yes.
I just want to jump in and say that you've been such a great example of finding all kinds of resources to help with what you're doing. There's a question, and I want to make sure that as someone who's out there doing this, do you have, are you insured as a teaching artist?
Yeah, I saw that question. I have on occasion been asked to be insured in order to teach at certain venues. In those cases, I've gotten a rider, which you can pay a very small amount. I think it was about $150 to cover yourself for the year. So I would say to anyone who's looking for insurance for themselves as a teaching artist to contact your insurance, home auto, and ask them if you can get a rider. It was very simple and very affordable.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done it unless I'm asked to.
So all this work that you were just describing, it's sort of your material that then so you've gotten grants for those to help you then continue the partnerships and get into the schools and communities to do the teaching. I'm just thinking about this audience that we have here, about what kind of grants they might write so that they could do their arts education projects.
Right. So let me back up. I'm always looking for grants. I'm always looking for money. If I get an email that has a grants list, I go through it and I make sure if I'm not missing anything. And if I find a grant that I think that I want to consider, then I'll put it on my, on the list. It's right here on the to-do list. And as it gets closer, 2-3 at least weeks from the deadline, I'll start really thinking about what's it going to be. So it's been a no-brainer with this pop-up cycler because I know what I'm trying to fund, but sometimes it's more specific to one grant for one project. I also want to, I definitely want to encourage people to look look a little broader, national grants are really difficult to get. Regional grants are easier to get. Very, very regional. Maine state grants are easier to get. So the more local the grant, the more likely the funding can come to you, I have found. But to have real clarity about what it is you want and backing up, having obsessed on a certain idea for a couple of years and then deciding I got to do this, it passed the test of, yeah, I'm committed to this enough to see it through, to get funding to make it happen. And then making adjustments along the way, like, maybe I'm not going to build the machines, I'm going to buy the machines, and seeking funding from other resources, crowdsourcing, partnering with, as an artist, partnering with a school or a nonprofit to come up with funding for the project. But I've had to fund the equipment that I'm using because this has been my piece. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we have room for a couple of more pieces of information. And I feel like you shared sort of this large scope of a project that you decided to go all in on, and you're being very successful at doing that, but you've also made it clear that you need to keep hustling to keep that going. And I know Kate also talked about having dates of when we spoke earlier, dates of grant deadlines in her calendar. And that's a really good practice. And as a teaching artist, it's good to know that you can have that practice too. Nonprofits have that practice, but individual teaching artists can have that practice too, and teachers. So I just wanted to get back to a couple questions, and I'm also just putting a bunch of links in the chat.
You're muted, Martha.
Martha, if you're talking, you're muted.
Oh my goodness. I said a whole bunch of stuff. I'm so sorry. Oh boy. I don't even remember what I said. I threw some stuff in the chat. You saw that. So there's a question about any more grants for this year. You can see those deadlines in the link that Kerstin sent, that he posted in the chat. Some deadlines coming right up. A question that came to me: will next year's grant structure be the same? We are not really sure. We're going to be evaluating how this year's has gone this summer and fall, because we revamped quite a bit this year, and we will be assessing that. The deadlines generally are in the spring. I can't say exactly when, for next year. And will the no match remain in place? That is also something I cannot give you a definitive answer about for upcoming years. Does David or Kerstin have anything to say about those questions?
Well, I would just say that thank you for asking, and thank you all for being here. I would say that there's a national conversation about grant giving, and it has to do with a lot about equity, and but also about trying to understand what the other ways are that you could award funding beyond, say, competitive grants, and whether or not there's any other ways to work. I don't think that we're going to change things drastically in the next year or so, but I'm certain that we're going to be having a lot of conversations about it, and when those conversations happen, we're actually going to be very intentional about involving people from the field in those conversations. So you'll hear about it when the conversations are happening.
Great, thank you, David. Kerstin, do you have anything to add before we close this webinar?
I don't think so. I hope it was informative and that you feel like you can access our applications and we'll go for some funding from us this time around. We really do enjoy seeing our money going to schools and getting and helping K through 12 populations and helping teachers. So we really hope that you'll take advantage of it.
Absolutely. I'm echoing that. That's one of the reasons why we had this webinar, and I hope that you all know that you can contact any of us about thinking about a project, reviewing some budgets or narrative for a project, and then after application, happy to talk more. I want to thank our panelists, Kim Bernard, Reba Askari, and Kate Smith, and all of you all who were here. Thanks for showing up, and I'm going to stop our recording now. Yes.